Ernie Stevens, welcome to the First Responder Friday podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Conrad. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about where you are and what do you do?
I don't know what I do half the time, but I'm located in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a police officer here for the San Antonio Police Department, and I'm assigned to the mental health unit.
So how long have you been in law enforcement?
28 years now. 28
Wow.
years, long years.
You made a
But
career out of it, huh?
I did. Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Yeah, so well, thank you for your service and for your service to your community. So tell me, how did you and your partner Joe get started, working with people that had mental health issues?
Yeah. So for me, it started in 2003. I was signed up to go to a CIT course, crisis intervention training, which I knew nothing about. It was actually my day off at work, and my partner, William Casberg, I'm going to drop his name on here, signed me up to go to the training. And when I returned to work, he told me, hey, we're signed up to go to this week-long training called crisis intervention. And when you're working dog watch, you sign up for any kind of training so you can get off of nights for a week and get a weekend off. So I was okay with it until I found out what the training was about. He told me this class is about how to interact and relate to people that are in a mental health crisis, try to understand and bring resources to them. And right away, I was immediately turned off. I was probably the last officer you wanted to respond to your house if you had a mental health crisis, because when I went through the academy, we had no training in mental health crisis response, none at all. So
that really, as a civilian, that boggles my mind that police officers are put on the street without any kind of training, and a lot of what police work is these days seems to fall into that mental health, issue.
Yeah, it should boggle your mind if you're a civilian, right? So, reluctantly I went, and it was on the third day of the training. We had a representative from the community come in. She was a member for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and she talked about her son that had mental illness. And she was reserved to the fact, Conrad, that the police were going to respond one day to her house and probably shoot and kill her son. But then she made a profound statement. She basically gave up in that moment and said, but if that happens, it's okay, because you don't understand and you have a family to go home to.
Wow.
And I was in shock. Like, I couldn't believe I heard somebody say that. And that was the catalyst. She was the fuel to the fire. That I just wasn't going to take no for an answer on getting a mental health unit started. Of course, as a patrolman, I can do very little, but I knocked on the right doors and made enough noise to where in 2008, the chief of police decided to go ahead and start a pilot project of mental health with me and another officer. And then eventually it grew, and that's where I met Joe about a year later.
So what did you have to do to convince the higher ups to make this happen?
Well, for the fire department, they're not going to respond unless there's a fire. So I tried everything I could. I knocked on doors. I tried talking to deputy chiefs, but I had to go to the community. The community at large, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, we have a very strong chapter here in San Antonio. They work very closely with the court system, the jail, the treatment facilities. So they actually made the contact at a legislative breakfast one morning where the chief was present, and kind of put him on the spot a little bit and asked him about if he had any desires or thoughts about starting a mental health unit. And I kind of put my head down because I knew I was going to get fired, suspended, or it was going to work out. And it worked out. The chief was very open and receptive to the idea. I think he came from a background of CIT training, so he knew the importance of it. And it was just, having the right people ask at the right time.
So what was the response from the community?
They loved it. We went out, and what we tried to do was take a lot of the pressure off of patrol. Anytime they would get a mental health call, we would try to rush out there and take the call from them, or we'd leave them at the hospital. But the time that we spent with the patient and the family, we wanted to make sure that we did more than just look at a snapshot of what was going on in the moment. We wanted to find out, how long have issues been going on? What kind of resources have you tried or have not tried? So we really plugged ourselves in with the local mental health authority, partnered with them so we could learn as well, what we were doing. And in doing so, the family was very receptive. The patients were very receptive. And then something profound happened. We found out that officers within the department were struggling as well.
Hmm.
and we had to start responding to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, and that's the one thing that we're talking about a lot on this show is, those first responders who themselves are dealing with issues like that. So walk me through a scenario, a typical scenario of what you guys would do. A call comes in, there's someone that's maybe combative doing some things. What do you guys do?
Right. So during the filming of the documentary, because we've changed just a little bit since then, but normally myself and Joe, we were partnered up and we would look for all the calls that were holding in the queue for the city and anything that was flagged mental health related. And we had to get that done too, because calls were coming in as suicide in progress, disturbance, injured sick person. There was no consistency to a mental health call. So we had to create a mental health call,
Hmm.
and the dispatchers had to be trained so they knew how to flag that call. And then once we saw a call come up for mental health, we would try to respond to that. But there were many days when there'd be 5 or 6 calls holding at once. And really, we had to let patrol know, hey, try to take the ones you think you can handle, but they're a little bit more intense. Give us a call, and we would stay busy all day long.
So what did you actually do when you went on one of these calls?
So when we would get there, we would contact the individual that was in crisis. We go out there dressed in plain clothes in an unmarked car. So we're trying to reduce any type of fear or stigma that the patient who's in crisis may fear of the police responding.
Because I
And
can
we,
imagine they would be maybe more combative, more reactive if you showed up with, a marked car and uniforms.
and it's interesting you say that, because in the documentary, there's actually a part in that where myself and Joe are working off duty for patrol, and we had to respond to somebody in uniform, and you could see the difference. From somebody that was very standoffish and didn't want to talk to us versus somebody who didn't even know who we were, and we were able just to walk up and approach them.
Hmm.
But what we're trying to do, Conrad, is not focus on the problem. We're trying to focus on that person and make a connection. And in doing so, build rapport and let them know that, hey, we're here. We care. We want to help you. We have no idea what you're going through, but if you would help us understand that, there may be a way we can work together to get you the help that you need.
Hmm. In the light of everything that's going on this year, I mean, how important is this kind of thing for police agencies to do?
I think if you're not doing it already, you're behind the ball. I mean, that's CIT training's been around since 1988. So this is not a new concept, but I think our approach is new. Very rarely do we have a department that comes to visit us that's even open to the idea of responding in plain clothes. It's just like, no, that's never been done before. We're not going to do that. And, when we first started the unit, we had to kind of define what a mental health unit was going to look like and how it was going to respond. And very early on, I got feedback from the public, and they said, we always see officers standing with their hands on their gun or on their taser, or their hands in between their vest, holding it out. And it's scary to us as a community. And I listened to them. And, when we set this up, we said, let's go out in plain clothes. Let's identify ourselves when we get there with our badge, and then put it away and just talk to them. Just like you and I are talking right now, to get to know each other, and then find out, what can we do to help resolve the issue that's going on in the moment, and make sure that you don't go back into a crisis after this moment's over with.
Hmm. Did you get some pushback from fellow officers?
We did a little bit. We were called the Hug a Thug unit. Y'all are a bunch of social workers now, but that didn't bother me, because I knew the results we were having within the community, and that's really where it matters. And as officers were coming through the training, because the chief ended up mandating that every single officer in patrol was going to get the CIT training, not just the 10% that's recommended through the Memphis model, but everybody. We saw that the officers that were most pushback, that gave us the most pushback, were those that had some type of mental health within their own family or a friend, and the system let them down or didn't help them. So they were very skeptical.
Hmm.
And, that could have been 10 years ago, and things change all the time. And now we have a lot more better collaboration. So as they went through the training and they saw the response and us coming out and relieving them, they bought into the concept. It didn't take long.
Hmm. When you first started this, did you see some, frequent flyers that you dealt with before that now there was a different response?
I love the question, because that's exactly what I'm doing now. We partnered with the local mental health authority and our San Antonio Fire Department, and we identified the top 100 most emergency detained or involuntarily committed individuals in the city. Frequent flyers, just like you said, those that are revolving through the hospitals or jail. And what we did was we started to pre-engage the crisis. Since now we knew who they were, we would go out there, find out, well, where's the gap? Is it medication? Is it transportation? Is it something as simple as ID recovery? And we were able to identify these gaps for treatment and services. The average for each person when we first started this program a year ago, they were being emergency detained about 1.62 times per month. Now that we've been engaged with these individuals, it's dropped to 0.92% per month. So less than one hospitalization per month. So it's been a great success. And what's important about this, Conrad, it's funded by the hospitals, which I love.
Sure.
I love them. Yeah, because
they're probably eating a lot of this anyway, right?
You nailed it. That's exactly what's happening. They wanted, and it's not just to say there were a lot of unfunded patients walking through the doors, but the patients themselves. It takes a lot of personnel to deal with somebody in a mental health crisis. And a lot of times the emergency room isn't the proper placement when in fact they needed to go to a treatment center. So this program that we've put together here, I think is going to be a national model overnight.
Yeah, it really reminds me of going way back to my early days. I worked in a psychiatric hospital, so I understand the amount of people that's needed, especially for someone who's combative and going through a real crisis. It really takes a lot of people to manage that, and when you're bringing people in, especially that's the critical moment. And so, having done this now for a while, what do you think is the future for policing? What should it look like?
Well, as we enter the social media blitz of defund the police, I think without getting into the specifics of how do you define that, I think you're going to see a change, and we've already seen it here, in how police departments respond to those in a mental health crisis. A lot of them are starting to partner with a clinician and maybe a peer support specialist or a paramedic, kind of like what we're doing here. And that's a much better approach. And a lot of times, once we've established rapport with that patient, and we know that the police probably won't be needed in the future, this is just somebody that needs to be checked on and maybe transported from time to time for a doctor's appointment, then we no longer need to respond to that. And because you got to think about it, if you're somebody that lives with a mental health diagnosis, why is it that that's the only call that the police have to intervene in your life? Like, you're not calling the police when you have to go get radiation or chemotherapy, but for mental health it is. So we try to remove ourselves as much as we can to be least restrictive from those types of calls. And I think you're going to see communities move towards those models.
And it's going to reduce the call volume for you, and where you can focus on keeping the community safe, right?
Yeah, it's funny because officers are like, well, wait till somebody gets hurt and then what? It's like they complain that they have to take all these mental health calls, but when you go to take them away and say, well, there's another way we can do this. Oh, somebody gets hurt, that's going to be it. So we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
Right. There's a lot of people around, and I've done ride-alongs with law enforcement, and I've seen, those kind of scenarios exactly, where you're coming up on a thing and it's someone that's in a crisis, in a mental health crisis, and it does kind of behoove the question is, why is law enforcement kind of the first responder on these issues? Why did that become a thing?
Yeah, and I think it's because we just became the de facto to everything. If your neighbor's tree is dropping pecans in your swimming pool, call the police, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a mental health call or somebody's playing their music too loud. The police seem to be just the ones you're going to call to solve every social issue that's going on in a community. And we became very archaic in that and never really transformed from that. And I think now we're seeing communities make these changes and having better responses, to the needs of the community.
Mm-hmm. What can people do? Maybe someone's watching, maybe they're a patrol officer in an agency, in a community. What can they do to start something like this, to go down the path that you guys did?
Yeah, I get phone calls all the time from officers wondering, hey, how did you do it? And everything just seemed to work. It was a perfect storm here because a local mental health authority had revamped the way that they were doing business here, and they were making law enforcement the priority. So they built a facility with 16 beds that we could get in and out of very quick to drop off a patient. They put medical clearance in there as well in case somebody had a scrape or a cut that needed stitches. We didn't have to go to a hospital anymore. And then they added sobering and detox to that same facility. So we didn't have to book anybody for being intoxicated anymore. So they made a one-stop shop. It's important that something like that's in place, because you can go do CIT training in a department and give the officers all the skills and tools they need to do a good job and be successful. But if you have nowhere to take a patient once they're in the back of your car, how successful is your program? So I would say partner with your local mental health authority, as difficult as that may be in some communities. I get it. But sit down and have conversation and invite other people to the table and get out of these silos that everybody's in, and really open this up as if it were a community issue, which it is.
And I think we have to look at what the ultimate goal is here. The goal is to have safer, better communities, and to, for the police to, solve crimes and to do those kind of things that police are supposed to do. And it really makes a better place for all of us when people with mental health issues are taken care of in a proper way and not just, approached in a more of a criminal attitude, right?
You nailed it, because I have some patients that have some criminal charges. So I work hand in hand with the court. And I ask the court, look, if you will release this patient to my care, I will ensure that they get to their doctor's appointment, that they meet with their case manager. If they've got community service, I'll drive them and pick them up. So we try to facilitate everything we can for that individual to be successful. And what I've seen on the back end of this are charges get dismissed. People become stable, whether they're on medications or learn good coping skills, and the quality of life improves. And it's not just for that person. It's for their friends and their families that they live with. And they become much more just happy about themselves and their life. And it's amazing. You get them qualified for benefits, you get them their ID and their birth certificate and their social security card, things that they haven't had. And it just does something to your heart when you see somebody else succeed and when they've been struggling for so long.
I think it's just part of being human, and it's recognizing people as human beings who have meaning, right, and have value.
Yeah, and I love what the director of the film said. When you watch the documentary, it's not a how-to film. It's really a film on human connection, like what you just said. It's stop being so robotic as a police officer and be human and listen to what individuals in your community are struggling with, and then educate yourself on what you can do to help them.
So speaking of the documentary, how did that come about?
That was pretty wild, let me tell you. So when we first started the unit, we got a little bit of local coverage, media coverage, because we were new and we were providing a new service. And then a writer by the name of Ann Snyder, who wrote for The Atlantic, came out and did a ride along, and she wrote an article that got pretty good press. And then we got a phone call from Byron Pitts from Nightline from ABC, who wanted to come down and do a ride along. And that ride along was phenomenal. I mean, we ended up, you can watch it on YouTube, but we ended up kicking down a door and doing CPR on a lady. And that one, he ran that story 3 times because police were involved in shootings involving people with mental health, with either a weapon or no weapon, that could have gone a different way based on training, right? So that story ran 3 times. The director of this film, Jen McShane, she saw Nightline. She knew the writer, Ann Snyder, and reached out to her and said, "What's going on down there in San Antonio with these two dummies, right? With Ernie and Joe?" And she told him, she goes, "Well, you just got to go see for yourself. They're cops, but they're not. It's hard to explain." And so she contacted us and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a documentary. Can I come down there and ride with y'all?" "Sure, go ahead." So she shows up with no camera, no sound crew. I'm like, who is this lady? Is she legit or not? But the whole time she said, "I just really wanted to get to know who y'all were and find out, is there really a feel for my vision?" Which we didn't know what it was. And I knew the call that got her. It was actually the very first call we went on was an individual that was homicidal, that wanted to kill his landlord that was living there at the house with him, kind of like a group home. And we were able to de-escalate the situation and let him know that, we're going to take you to receive some treatment. He agreed to it, but he said, "You know what? I'm not going to ride in the back of that police car." Even though it was unmarked, it still kind of looks like one. I said, "Well, that's fine. Just ride up front with Joe. I'll ride in the back." And I remember she kind of grabbed me by the arm and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're giving him a ride." Like, I didn't understand the question, but knowing that she comes from New York, she was like, "This would never happen, like
Sure.
ever."
Hmm.
And so, we sat him up front, I sat in the back, and we dropped him off for treatment and followed up with him to make sure everything was okay. And at that moment, she said, "Okay, there's a story here. Y'all will probably see a lot of me." And we did for 3 years. Conrad, she filmed for 3 years,
Wow.
over 300 hours for a 96-minute documentary.
Wow. That's really cool. I haven't seen the film yet because I don't have HBO, but I hope to see it sometime very soon. And
Oh,
I've seen the
good, good.
trailer, which looks fantastic. And I guess it won a bunch of awards and it's been in all kinds of film festivals, and people can
Yeah,
see it.
we got nominated for 2 Emmys and won one of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a great testament to the entire team that put the documentary together.
Sure. Well, I think it's a testament to what you guys are doing, and that's really the story is that what you guys are taking care of people. You're caring for people that otherwise may not, just be outcast or be pushed aside. I think, and that speaks volumes. And in today's world, where COVID has increased stress for all of us, I think we need more and more of that. Have you seen kind of a rise in mental health issues because of COVID?
So what I've noticed about COVID, it did a couple of things. It really advanced technology, where it was taking a long time for a patient to get in to see a doctor. Now with telemedicine and telepsych, they actually can get in a lot quicker and they can see a lot more patients that way. That was a positive. The negative aspect for us, one, of course, was the dangerousness of the virus itself. Having to still go out and contact people, but the when we would go to a hospital to follow up with a patient to find out what can we do to help them with their discharge plan, we were stopped at the door. Hey, y'all can't come in due to COVID. The hospital's locked down, and it was very difficult trying to, put into place a good discharge plan into maybe a shelter or another group home or maybe a step down facility because we just weren't able to get that contact. And trying to reach social workers by phone, it really slowed the process down for us.
Hmm.
And
So
dealing with kids too, by the way, you walk up to a kid wearing a mask and gloves and safety glasses, they get scared.
yeah, sure.
So adolescents were very difficult to reach as well.
Just in your department there or in your city, have you seen just COVID impact law enforcement officers with more stress and trauma, really?
We have actually our sixth floor where I work up there. We've had several officers get diagnosed with COVID, along with patrol. The stress is there because we've also seen an increase in officer use of force this
Hmm.
year, and I don't know if that's correlation or causation of some of the things that are happening here in San Antonio. But the stress level for, I think, everybody has gone up tremendously, of course, including the officers. So, that's something to look at as well. I didn't think about that until you asked that question, but definitely a factor to think about.
Hmm. What do you hope eventually really comes out of this, out of the movie and out of what you guys are doing?
Some good things have actually come out of the movie. We just got published in a children's book about if you can dream it, you can do it, kind of a hero's book. And it has all the, like Ruth Ginsburg's in there, Tesla's in there, and Ernie and Joe are in there. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? But honestly, I think the best part is the continued conversation about mental health. Number one, we're still doing a lot of film festivals or presentations for NAMI, for universities, and for other police departments that want to know, what can we do to change our approach? What are the pros and cons to what y'all are doing? Kind of what you asked. What were the stumbling blocks along the way? So luckily, we've been doing this now 13 years as a unit, so I can kind of help guide departments in things that we've tried and failed at and things that we've done and succeeded at to help them maybe shortcut putting a unit together.
Hmm. What in your work and the work in the mental health industry, what really makes your heart sing?
For me, one, it's helping the officers. I love having the opportunities to help an officer knowing that they're asking for help. Where 5, 10 years ago, they would have never asked for help. But knowing who we are now and establishing who we are, and that we're very confidential in what we do, and watching an officer become successful as going through a difficult time, number one, I love that. And number two, again, watching community members do well, be successful, be happy, reunite with families. Um, it's watching them get benefits, their faces light up the first time they get their ID card. They're like, wow, I got my first ID card. It's the little things to me, really, because a lot of it is just baby steps in a long road to treatment and to recovery. And I look forward every day to going to work and doing that.
In the project that I'm working on, PTSD 911, we're dealing with other types of agencies, not only law enforcement, but we're working with all first responders, fire, EMS, dispatch, those kind of agencies. What do you think, as a whole, first responders need in order to live healthy, in order to do their job in a better way, in a healthier, have a healthier lifestyle? What needs to happen with first responder agencies?
I think for sure agencies have to create a culture of wellness. If they don't, the officers just, really, what help's going to be available? So let me just talk a little bit about what that looks like, right? First of all, there has to be awareness. It's okay not to be okay, right? It's just not okay to stay that way. Signage, talking about the help that's available, little things like a sign that says "You matter" before you go out to your patrol car. Just putting some type of awareness out there that, hey, the department is here and we care about you. Number two is having some type of resource available for the officer. And I'm not a representative. I don't work for anybody outside of this, other than my own business, but something like an app, like Cortico has an app. I don't know if you're too familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was scrolling through that, looking at that a couple of weeks ago when I was out in California teaching. That's an amazing app. And that's something an officer has access to 24/7. A peer support program, I think, is important if it's done correctly. And it's not just peer support. It's having a peer support program with outside help, right? For what I'm trying to do here, what I've introduced to San Antonio is a therapy dog program. I've got a volunteer group that comes in with therapy dogs that visits the substations, headquarters, and they're available for any kind of traumatic event if need be. Resiliency programs, having classes on mindfulness and gratitude and yoga, things to help them be resilient. I visited a department that has quiet rooms at every substation and in the dispatch office, just off of that. And it's funny because each substation got to set up their own quiet room, what it would look like. Some of them had like little waterfalls and it was nice and quiet. Others actually had some gym equipment in it. The dispatchers did, because they sit for hours at a time, and then their break, they want to get in there and kind of move a little bit. So I saw some that had some gym equipment in it. I also think involving the family from the day you're hired is important. Let them know that they're a part of this department. Bring them in and let them tour the police department. Let them know what to expect. If a workman's compensation happens, they're the eyes and ears for the officer at home, because the officer may not want to come home and talk about it. And it's important that the family knows what resources are available to them as well. And also, I think if you look at the recruiting brochures that departments put out, I guarantee you, I could probably go to any department and there's going to be a SWAT officer on the front, somebody hanging out of a helicopter, the K9 unit. But where is it that the department is saying, hey, we care about you from the time that you're a rookie to retirement? Like, I don't care what those other departments are showing off in their brochures. We want you to know that we're invested into your wellness. So if you can build a culture of wellness for officers, healthy vending machines, just little things, it shows them, hey, they care about me as a person, as human capital. They care about me. I think that's what departments need to do. It's not so much what the officer can do, but what will the department do for the officer?
I've asked this to a lot of people on this show and outside of this show. What do you do with someone when you have leadership that doesn't see that?
Well, you're hitting close to home sometimes, aren't you? That's tough because you're going to have buy-in from the leadership. If not, you're going to fall back on EAP programs, which may or may not be sufficient. Apps like Cortico cost money, so if the department's not going to invest in that, that's not going to be a resource. So there has to be either the associations or the unions, if they're large enough to have that, to put something in place. I'm actually wearing a shirt from our 100 Club. They help a lot with officer wellness. They do walks with families for family members that have lost loved ones in the line of duty. They always stay engaged. So having some type of outside resource that believes in that type of program may be kind of another avenue you might have to look at if leadership's not buying into it.
Mm-hmm. So on a personal level, what do you do to stay healthy?
Wow. Spirituality is huge for me, and you'll see it in the documentary. I'm very closely tied in with my church and my church family. I've got a lot of friends outside of law enforcement, which I think is very important. A lot of diversity in my friends. I love working out. I practice martial arts daily. Family time is very, very important to me. And then taking time off. If you're a young officer, yeah, I've been there, done that. I worked every extra job that came along, but it comes with a price, right? My price was a marriage, my first marriage. I learned from that. You've got to pace yourself. Don't chase the dollar bill. Take advantage of your vacation time, and don't take your vacation to work extra jobs. Take your vacation and go on a vacation. And that just, for me, that's key. I wake up every morning with a gratitude app, how to start my day. I list 3 things I'm grateful for and why. Just try to get my mind in a positive place before I start the day.
Mm-hmm. What's a situation that you experienced, perhaps, with dealing with, someone who was having a crisis that made you really thankful that you had this training?
Well, I think for sure it had to do with an officer. He called me up one day. I was actually on my way out of town with my family, and he called me up, and I could tell his voice something was wrong. And he said, "Look, man, I'm gonna be honest. I got my gun in my mouth. I'm done." And I said, "I tell you what, I'm 20 minutes away. Just if you will please, just let me come and see you and talk to you. Man, I love you. Your friends love you. Your family loves you. Just please give me that opportunity." And I turned around and got back to town as quick as I could, and took him to the hospital, sat with him, didn't leave him, because to me, Conrad, these officers have that emergency button on their radio that when they get in trouble, they punch it and everybody comes showing up. Well, this officer, his emotional E-tone was going off, but nobody was showing up. And it was important, that I knew what resources were in place. I knew the people that I needed to know to get through the doors I needed to get through to get him help right away. And today he is in a great relationship. He's still an officer. He's been promoted since then, and his life is happy. So, that's just one occasion. Every day, I get fulfilled with joy from watching other people, do well or take advantage of taking a hand from somebody. When there's a lot of people, especially officers, that because of the stigma involved in mental health, they close up, they shut themselves off, and they won't ask for help.
When will this kind of training be SOP for agencies at the academy level?
Yeah, that's tough because with CIT training, it's very decentralized, right? So some of the programs are 16 hours long, some are 40 hours long, some have role plays, some don't. So no 2 programs are ever alike because a lot of it is based on what resources are available in your community. So there definitely needs, if you look at the PERF report, if you look at ICAT, all the national standards suggest that you do a CIT training, but don't do it just to check the box. Put a gold standard on it. Take the time and invest in the role play scenarios if that's what you need to measure, whether the individual's learning, the participants learning, what you're teaching during during your class time. Does that translate into what they're doing out in the field? And there's other measures you can do. You can start measuring your use of force on the department and watching. Here we saw it go down for 5 years in a row. As the training increased, the use of force went down. So I would love to take responsibility for that, but I'm not going to because it's just there's so much that can be done with CIT training, and I think departments are really missing the mark if they're not providing the best possible training that's available out there.
Hmm. So if a department maybe has leadership, maybe an officer has leadership that doesn't really buy into it yet, what's one step they can do to kind of move the needle in the right direction?
Get involved with the community. Here I mentioned the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I joined them as an organization to learn about mental health before we even had a mental health unit because I didn't know exactly just what I went through the class. But meeting the families and talking to them and meeting the individuals with mental health diagnoses and then volunteering at the walks and just seeing what a huge part of our community that group of individuals make up is amazing. The stats show that 25% of people live with some type of mental health diagnosis in this country.
Mm.
So, you've got to get involved, volunteer, learn about mental health, and then approach your leadership and, suggest whether you get a unit put together or at least have some type of liaison in place that can talk with the local mental health authority to find out what resources are new and available, medications, transportations, mental health courts are new and coming around. So there's a lot to get involved in.
Hmm. Very good. So if someone wants to learn directly from you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, a couple of ways. Actually, I have a business where I do training. You can email me at Ernie, ERNIE, at silked, SILKED.org. I'm on Twitter at eStevens0845. And that's really, the easiest way. I always respond to everybody on Twitter. It takes me all day sometimes, but I do it. We're training all over. Me and my partner, Athena Grace from Washington, D.C. We're out in California quite a bit right now. We'll be in Colorado in 3 weeks teaching out there and then up in Spokane. So I'm looking forward to these opportunities.
Very good. Well, I want to say congratulations on the work that you're doing. Congratulations, obviously, on the movie and the success of that, and just bringing awareness to what needs to be done, what can be done. And I think that's sometimes something that first responder agencies need to see. This is what can be done in your community to make a difference. And I think films like that and the one that we're working on is going to help raise those awarenesses.
Yeah, and just by keeping the conversation going, like with what you're doing with your film, that's amazing. That's what needs to be done. You're going to see a shift in how law enforcement is going to be conducted in the future. Procedural justice is coming in heavy and with a vengeance. So departments are going to have to learn about procedural justice if they don't know already about it. And it's just a whole new level of customer service that we may not have been doing correctly. And I think in doing so and just showing that law enforcement is more than just fighting crime, it's about being embedded in the community that we're a part of anyway and providing the best possible service to those that we can.
Yeah. And in the meantime, keeping those officers and those workers healthy themselves. I think that's vital.
Yeah. 236 officers committed suicide last year, according to New Help.
Right.
So we're killing ourselves at a rate of 4-1.
Yeah.
At dying in the line of duty. We've got to do better for us. Leadership, you've got to do better. You got to do better for your officers. Please, they need you. Their families count on you to provide those services. So if there's a question about that, I always point to the Asher model. You can Google that. It's a 7-step approach to creating a culture of wellness within your department.
Very good. Well, what's the final word from you that you want people to really know about working with people in your community who have mental health issues? What's the one thing that people need to know and understand about that?
Well, what I think number one is, and it took me about 15 years in my career to understand this, is people don't care how much you know. I've got a degree hanging behind me on the wall. They don't care about that. They just want to know how much you care. So humanize the badge, humanize yourself when you're out there trying to, connect with somebody and show some empathy about what they're going through and be that catalyst to help them. I think that's the most important thing that you can take away from today.
That's awesome. Well, Ernie, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today here on the First Responder Friday podcast. I really appreciate it. And I wish you and your family and your fellow officers a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you, Conrad. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our First Responder Friday show for 2020. We're so glad that you were able to join us for the past number of months for this program. We've had some amazing interviews. If you haven't seen all of them, go back and look at the archives. You can go to our YouTube channel or go to our Facebook page or our website, ptsd911movie.com, and check them all out. Check out all the previous episodes that we've had here on First Responder Friday. Just a reminder that our show title, the name will change in the new year. It'll be called the First Responder Leadership Podcast, with still an emphasis on wellness and mental health in the first responder community. And we have some amazing interviews scheduled for the new year, including the very launch on January 8th with Stephen Stevens, the immediate past president of the International Chiefs of Police. He will be joining us for a show on that day. And we have some other amazing people scheduled for the program, the First Responder Leadership Podcast. Be sure to go to Apple Podcasts and like and subscribe. And if you could, please leave a review for the show. When you leave a review, it helps us raise in the rankings and allows more people to see this show and more first responders to get the benefits that they can get from watching this show and listening to the people that we bring to the show. If you know of someone that would be a great fit for our program, please send me a note, conrad@conjostudios.com. I'd love to hear who that person would be, and maybe even an introduction if you know that person. So from all of us at PTSD 911 Movie and the First Responder Friday podcast series, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I wish you the very best for the new year. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the new year.